With me now is Michelle T. at Writing Outside the Margins Queer Literary Festival. Michelle, your first book came out in 1998. After 1998, you've published a string of really good memoirs, and you've moved into poetry and fiction writing, and you've also published a number of anthologies. Did you ever feel that writing about so much about your life was a crazy thing to be doing?
Well, it was happening in the context of a literary scene that was erupting in San Francisco, in which a lot of people were writing about their lives, and a lot of queer people were writing about our lives. And so it had this sort of political almost boost to it, where we felt like we have to get our stories out there. It's really imperative that we get our stories out there. Too much has been written about queers that's untrue historically, or about women, and we need to kind of set the story straight, so to speak.
She lets me see her naked, and her belly and her boobs are so phenomenal and cool looking. I totally understand why some people get fetishes for pregnant ladies, which I then feel bad about when Jasmine asks me, totally disgusted, if I knew that some people have fetishes for pregnant ladies.
Do some people put more emphasis on the crazy life as opposed to the writing? How do you balance those two things?
The writing community, I was a part of it. A lot of it took place in bars. People were drinking, people were noisy, people had ulterior motives for being there. They didn't necessarily want to hear literature, they wanted to get laid in the bathroom. So it was good for writers to be able to really grab people's attention, and for better or worse, stories that are really funny, really crazy, out of control, stories about sex and drugs, those are the stories that people in a bar setting will shut up and listen to and toast to. So there definitely became this aesthetic, was created as a result of that.
You've said how memoir is almost the format of youth, of writing in your youth. Can you explain that?
Did I say that? It sounds so wise.
I've seen it in print.
Okay. Well, I feel like I felt very much more inspired to write memoir in my 20s than I do now in my 30s, and I think that it was definitely a vehicle for me to understand myself and reflect my understanding of myself back at myself. It really worked in a psychological fashion for me. There's so many, I wrote because I'm a writer and I wanted to create a body of work, but then there's also these great little psychological, helpful things that happen when you're a writer, especially if you're writing about your own self. So, and I just didn't have any sense of any sort of repercussion that could potentially happen, and none really have, so that was the right way to be. But I definitely feel a bit more protective now about other people's privacy, certainly a little bit more protective of my own privacy, not much though.
You've moved into writing fiction, and I wanted to ask you, because that requires a very different skill set. Is that frightening, moving into fiction?
Yeah, it's awful. So much easier to write your own story. It's like I already know the main character, I know what happened. It's like writing fiction is really challenging because you have to kind of create everything from the ground up. And certainly I'm still drawing from my own experience. I'm only going to be able to write sort of what's in my range to write, even in fiction. Like the stories that I have the ability to create. But it's definitely challenging to sustain a plot and sustain speaking in the voice of somebody who's not you for that long is really challenging. But yeah, but it's good to challenge yourself as a writer. I just realized I just can't write. At that point, right before I wrote Rose of No Man's Land, I was like, I can't write another memoir about myself. I'm going to just feel like such a cliche to my own self.
Well, thank you very much for being here. It was great to have you, and I know a lot of people are very happy that you made the trip up.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.